"You're just a burden now, Mom. We don't need you anymore." Those words cut deeper than any knife ever could. After 10 years of sacrificing everything, my retirement, my health, my own dreams, to raise his children while he built his career, my son Michael looked me straight in the eye and called me a burden. But what he didn't know was that I had been quietly preparing for this moment. Hidden in my desk drawer was a manila folder that would change everything. Inside, a trust fund statement showing exactly how much this burden had been worth to his family. The next morning, I placed that folder on his kitchen table and watched his face go white as he realized the truth about who the real burden had been. All along. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It all started on a rainy Tuesday morning in October 2014. I was 58 years old, finally settling into what I thought would be the peaceful chapter of my life. My husband Robert had passed away 3 years earlier, and I was learning to navigate life alone in our quiet home in Maple Grove, Minnesota. The mortgage was paid off, I had a modest nest egg saved up, and for the first time in decades, I could wake up without an alarm clock. That morning, I was sipping my coffee and reading the newspaper when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my son Michael's name, but it was his wife Patricia's voice on the other end, shaking and desperate. "Eleanor, I need your help," she sobbed into the phone. "The kids. I can't. Michael's career is taking off, and I just got diagnosed with severe postpartum depression after Emma was born. The doctor says I need intensive treatment, maybe even inpatient care. We can't afford childcare for 3 kids while I'm getting help and Michael's traveling for work." My heart sank as I listened to her explain the situation. Michael, 32 at the time, had just been promoted to regional sales director at a pharmaceutical company. It meant better money, but also meant he'd be on the road 4 days a week, sometimes more. Patricia was drowning trying to manage 7-year-old Tyler, 4-year-old Sophie, and newborn Emma while battling depression so severe she could barely get out of bed. "What exactly are you asking, Patricia?" I said gently, though I already knew where this conversation was headed. Would you consider moving in with us? Just temporarily, until I get better and the kids are older. Michael makes good money, but not enough for a full-time nanny, and my parents live in Florida. You're the only family we have nearby. I stared out my kitchen window at the garden Robert and I had planted together, at the bird feeder we'd hung on our anniversary. This house held 40 years of memories, and the thought of leaving it, even temporarily, felt like abandoning the life I'd built. But these were my grandchildren. Tyler, with his gap-toothed grin and obsession with dinosaurs. Sophie, who still called me Gamma Ellie, and insisted I read her the same bedtime story every time I visited. And little Emma, barely 3 months old, who I'd only held a handful of times. "How long are we talking about?" I asked. Patricia's silence stretched. "Too long." Finally, she whispered, "I don't know, maybe a year, maybe 2. The doctors can't say for sure how long my recovery will take. And with Michael's new position, a year turned into 2. 2 turned into 5. Before I knew it, I had been living in Michael and Patricia's 4-bedroom colonial in Bloomington for a decade, watching my grandchildren grow up while my own life remained frozen in time. Those first few months were brutal. Patricia spent 6 weeks in a residential treatment facility, leaving me alone with 3 young children while Michael traveled constantly. I was thrust back into a world of diapers and sleepless nights, at an age when most of my friends were booking cruise vacations and joining book clubs. Emma was a colicky baby who screamed for hours every evening. I'd walk the hardwood floors of their living room, bouncing her gently while Tyler did homework at the kitchen table, and Sophie begged for help finding her favorite stuffed animal. By the time I got all 3 kids fed, bathed, and in bed, it was often past 10 p.m., and I still had to clean the kitchen, prep bottles for the next day, and do laundry. My own needs became invisible. The small bedroom they'd given me, originally Michael's home office, felt more like a storage closet than a living space. My belongings remained in boxes stacked in the corner because there wasn't enough room for proper furniture. I slept on a pull-out sofa bed that left my back aching every morning, but I told myself it was temporary. Patricia would get better. Michael would find a balance between work and family, and I'd return to my own home. I kept paying the mortgage on my house in Maple Grove, even though it sat empty except for the twice-monthly visits I made to check on things and tend to Robert's rose bushes. When Patricia returned from treatment, I expected things to change. Instead, they settled into a new normal where I remained the primary caregiver. Patricia was better, functional, even cheerful on her good days. But she'd developed what she called anxiety around parenting responsibilities. She could handle light tasks like helping with homework or reading bedtime stories, but anything involving real responsibility, doctor appointments, school conferences, discipline issues, fell to me. Eleanor handles it so much better than I do, she'd tell her friends with a grateful smile. I'm just not cut out for the day-to-day stuff. Michael was supportive of whatever made Patricia comfortable. His career was thriving, and he traveled even more frequently as he climbed the corporate ladder. When he was home, he wanted to relax and enjoy quality time with the kids, not deal with the mundane tasks of parenting. So I became the homework supervisor, the permission slip signer, the one who stayed up all night when someone had the flu. I was the one who knew Tyler needed his inhaler before soccer practice, that Sophie was afraid of the dark and needed her door cracked open, that Emma refused to eat anything green unless it was mixed with cheese. The kids began calling me Grandma. Ellie in that casual way children do when someone is simply always there. But to their friends, their teachers, their coaches, I was often mistaken for their mother. I was the one at every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every birthday party. Michael and Patricia appeared for the big moments: Christmas morning, graduation ceremonies, family photos. But I was there for everything else. Years blended together. Tyler started middle school, then high school. Sophie discovered a love for art and spent hours at the kitchen table creating elaborate drawings while I cooked dinner. Emma grew from a fussy baby into a bright, curious little girl who followed me around the house, chattering about everything she observed. I loved them fiercely, completely. They were my world, and I couldn't imagine life without their daily presence. But somewhere along the way, I realized I had disappeared. The woman who had once run her own small business, who had traveled with her husband, who had friends and hobbies and dreams, had been completely absorbed into the role of caregiver. My house in Maple Grove sat empty, accumulating dust and repair, issues I couldn't afford to fix because every penny went toward helping support Michael's household. The kids' needs always came first: school supplies, sports equipment, birthday parties, family vacations I helped fund but rarely enjoyed. Michael's salary had grown substantially over the years, but somehow expenses always seemed to exceed income. There were always reasons why they couldn't take over more of the childcare costs, couldn't hire help, couldn't manage without me. Patricia's therapy was expensive. Michael's job required a certain image: the right clothes, the right car, the right neighborhood. The kids' activities and educational needs were priorities. "We're so grateful for everything you do," Michael would tell me during our rare one-on-one conversations. "I don't know how we'd manage without you. But gratitude doesn't pay bills or restore lost years." As I approached my 68th birthday, I began to realize that temporary had become permanent, and I had never agreed to give up my entire life. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening in March 2024. I had spent the weekend helping Emma with a science fair project while Michael and Patricia attended a work conference in Chicago. We'd worked for hours building a volcano model, and Emma was so proud of our creation. When her parents returned that evening, she ran to show them our work. "That's nice, honey," Michael said absently, scrolling through emails on his phone. "Grandma, Ellie did a great job helping you." Patricia nodded vaguely, already focused on unpacking their weekend bags. Neither of them asked Emma to explain how the volcano worked, or praised her for the research she'd done, or even looked closely at what we'd built together. Later, after the kids were in bed, I sat at the kitchen table looking at that volcano model and realized that somewhere along the way, I had become invisible even to my own son. I wasn't Eleanor anymore, the woman who had raised him, who had her own thoughts and dreams and needs. I was just Grandma Ellie, the convenient solution to their childcare problem. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. It was time to remind my family exactly who they were dealing with and what this temporary arrangement had really cost me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 10 years. I locked myself in my small bedroom and pulled out a box I'd kept hidden under my bed. Inside were bank statements, legal documents, and financial records that told a story my family had never bothered to ask about. You see, what Michael and Patricia never knew was that when Robert died in 2011, he left me more than just a paid-off house and his life insurance policy. My late husband had been a meticulous investor, quietly building a portfolio over 30 years of marriage that I'd barely understood while he was alive. After his death, when I finally met with his financial advisor, Jonathan Brennan, I discovered Robert had left me with assets worth nearly $800,000. Your husband was incredibly smart with money. Mrs. Henderson, Jonathan had told me in his downtown Minneapolis office. He set up everything to provide you with a comfortable retirement. Between your Social Security, his pension, and the investment income, you should never have to worry about money again. But that was before I moved in with Michael's family, before I started covering grocery bills when money was tight, before I paid for Tyler's baseball equipment, Sophie's art supplies, and Emma's preschool tuition. Before I funded family vacations, I was too exhausted to enjoy and covered medical bills when Patricia's therapy wasn't fully covered by insurance. Now, sitting on my narrow bed with those documents spread around me, I calculated exactly how much my temporary stay had cost me. The numbers were staggering. Over 10 years, I had contributed nearly $400,000 to Michael's household expenses, not loans, gifts that were never discussed as anything other than me helping out. $400,000 of my retirement savings gone. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was my house in Maple Grove. In 2018, when Michael's company relocated him to a position that required even more travel, Patricia had what she called a breakdown at the thought of managing the children alone. She begged me to sell my house and make the living arrangement permanent. It doesn't make sense to keep paying for a house you never use, Michael had argued. The money from the sale could go toward your retirement fund, and you'd have a permanent home here with us? I should have said no. Every instinct told me to say no. But Emma was only 4 then, still having nightmares and clinging to me when her parents fought. Sophie was struggling in school and needed stability. Tyler was going through a difficult phase and only seemed to open up to me. So I sold my beautiful house, the house where Robert and I had celebrated 32 anniversaries, where I'd raised Michael, where I'd planned to spend my golden years. I sold it for $275,000 and, at Michael's suggestion, deposited the money into what he called a family trust fund. This way, the kids' college expenses are covered and you have a guaranteed income stream, he'd explained, showing me documents he'd had prepared by his lawyer. It's a win-win situation. What I didn't understand then, what I was too trusting to investigate properly, was that this family trust fund was structured to benefit Michael's children, with me as the primary contributor and Michael as the trustee. I had essentially funded my grandchildren's future while giving my son control over my money. The monthly allowance I received from the trust was less than what I would have earned just from the interest on my original investments. Meanwhile, Michael had been using the trust to cover major expenses, home renovations, new cars, even a family trip to Europe last summer that I was too tired to join. Sitting there with bank statements and legal documents scattered across my bedspread, I realized I had been financially manipulated for years. Not maliciously, perhaps. I don't think Michael consciously set out to steal from me. But he had taken advantage of my love for my family and my ignorance about financial matters to subsidize his lifestyle while convincing me I was the one being helped. The trust fund currently held $340,000, money that was legally designated for Tyler's, Sophie's, and Emma's education and future needs, but money that Michael controlled and had been freely accessing for years. Money that should have been earning compound interest in my retirement accounts, ensuring my own future security. I called Jonathan Brennan that afternoon. "Eleanor, I've been wondering how you were doing," he said warmly. "It's been years since we've talked. How's retirement treating you?" "Jonathan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If I had left Robert's investments alone and just lived off the income, where would I be financially today?" There was a pause. "Well, let me pull up your old portfolio. Eleanor, at the market's current levels, you'd be looking at assets worth approximately $1.2 million. Your annual income from dividends and interest would be around $45,000, plus Social Security." My stomach dropped. Instead of being a millionaire living comfortably on investment income, I was a 68-year-old woman with no home of her own, completely dependent on a family that saw her as a burden. "Jonathan, I need to ask you about something called a family trust fund. My son set it up." As I described the arrangement, I could hear the concern growing in his voice. "Eleanor, I need to see these documents. Can you bring them to my office tomorrow? I'm worried you may have been... Well, let's just say these arrangements don't usually benefit the contributor as much as they should." That evening, I sat at the dinner table watching my family interact as if seeing them for the first time. Michael came home from his latest business trip with gifts for the kids, expensive electronics and designer clothes that I knew cost more than my monthly allowance from the trust fund. Patricia showed off her new engagement ring upgrade, an anniversary gift from Michael that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. The children, now 17, 14, and 10, had grown up accustomed to a lifestyle that their parents' income alone couldn't support. Tyler casually mentioned needing $200 for a school trip. Sophie wanted to take private art lessons that cost $150 per session. Emma needed a new tablet for school because hers was too slow. All of these requests were directed at me, as they had been for years. "Grandma Ellie, can you help with..." had become the family's solution to every financial need that wasn't covered by Michael's salary. But now I was seeing it differently. Every dollar I gave them was a dollar taken from my own future security. Every small favor was actually a withdrawal from my dwindling independence. After dinner, I helped Emma with her math homework while Michael and Patricia watched Netflix in the living room. As I explained fractions for the third time, Emma looked up at me with her big brown eyes and said, "Grandma Ellie, will you live with us forever?" My heart squeezed. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because Mommy and Daddy were talking about how you don't have anywhere else to go." Daddy said, "You're lucky we let you stay here." The words hit me like a physical blow. Lucky they let me stay, in the home I'd been financially supporting for a decade, while living in a converted office and subsidizing their lifestyle with my retirement savings. That night, I made my second phone call in 2 days, this time to a lawyer. "Mrs. Henderson, based on what you're telling me, there are several concerning aspects to this arrangement," Attorney Sarah Walsh told me the next morning. "Let me ask you directly. Do you have any legal right to remain in your son's house?" I realized with growing horror that I didn't. I had no lease, no ownership stake, no legal protection at all. I was essentially a paying boarder who could be asked to leave at any time, with nowhere to go and limited resources to start over. "What are my options?" I asked. Sarah reviewed the trust documents I'd brought. "Well, The good news is that you can revoke your contribution to this trust fund. The bad news is that it's been used for expenses that may not meet the legal definition of educational or future needs. Your son may have to return money to the trust that he's already spent. How much money are we talking about? She pulled out a calculator. Based on these withdrawals, approximately $180,000 over the past 6 years. That afternoon, I sat in my tiny room and made a decision that would change everything. I was going to take back control of my life and my finances. But first, I needed my family to understand exactly what my presence in their lives had been worth. I began documenting everything. Every grocery receipt I'd paid for, every utility bill I'd covered, every expense I'd subsidized, every hour of childcare I'd provided, calculated at the rate they would have paid a professional nanny, every meal I'd cooked, every load of laundry I'd done, every school event I'd attended as the primary caregiver. The numbers were staggering. Over 10 years, I had provided services worth approximately $650,000, not including the direct financial contributions. I had essentially funded my son's family's lifestyle while being treated as a guest who should be grateful for the privilege. It was time for them to see the real math. But first, I needed to hear exactly how they viewed my role in their lives. I had a feeling that the conversation was coming sooner than I expected. The opportunity to hear their true feelings came sooner than I expected, and in the most devastating way possible. It was a Thursday evening in late March. I had just finished helping Tyler with his college application essays. He was applying to expensive private universities naturally, when I overheard Michael and Patricia talking in their bedroom. Their door was slightly ajar, and their voices carried down the hallway as I was collecting laundry from the bathroom. "I'm telling you, Patricia, something has to change," Michael was saying, his voice strained with frustration. "My mother has been acting strange lately. All these questions about finances, asking to see documents. Yesterday, she actually asked me for a full accounting of the trust fund expenditures." "What did you tell her?" Patricia asked. "I told her I'd get her the information, but honestly, I don't know how to explain some of those withdrawals. The kitchen, renovation, the new car, Emma's private school tuition. Technically, that stuff wasn't supposed to come out of the educational trust." My blood ran cold. Emma's private school tuition? They had told me the public school wasn't meeting her needs and asked me to help with temporary private school costs. I had been writing checks directly to the school for 2 years, not knowing they were also pulling money from the trust fund for the same expenses. "Maybe it's time to have a conversation with her about moving to one of those senior living communities," Patricia suggested. "She's almost 70, Michael. At some point, we're going to be taking care of her, and honestly, I barely have the bandwidth for our own kids." "But who would watch the kids when I travel? And you know your anxiety gets bad when you're alone with them for too long. We could hire an actual nanny, someone young who doesn't ask questions about every penny we spend, someone who understands boundaries." I pressed myself against the hallway wall, barely breathing as I listened to them discuss my future like I was a piece of furniture they were considering donating. "The thing is," Michael continued, "Mom doesn't really have anywhere else to go. When she sold her house, she put everything into the trust fund. She's completely dependent on us now." "Exactly why we need to set some boundaries," Patricia said firmly. "She's gotten too comfortable treating this like her house instead of understanding she's a guest here. Did you see how she rearranged the kitchen cabinets without asking? And she's been throwing away my magazines before I finish reading them." I wanted to scream. I had rearranged the kitchen cabinets to make cooking more efficient after 10 years of preparing their meals. I had thrown away magazines that were 6 months old and piling up on every surface. These weren't power grabs. They were the actions of someone who had been managing their household for a decade. "Look, I love my mother," Michael said, "but she needs to understand that things are different now. The kids are older, more independent. We don't need as much help as we used to. And honestly, sometimes I feel like she's more of a burden than a help." There it was, the word that would haunt me for days to come. burden. Maybe we should start charging her rent, Patricia suggested. I mean, she's getting that monthly income from the trust fund anyway. It's not like she has other expenses. No other expenses? I wanted to laugh if it weren't so heartbreaking. I still paid for groceries, utilities, household supplies, and most of the children's extras. My monthly income from the trust fund barely covered my personal needs, let alone rent. That's actually not a bad idea, Michael said thoughtfully. Market rate for a room in this neighborhood is probably $800 a month. With utilities and food included, we could justify $1,000. They were planning to charge me rent to live in a house I had been financially supporting for years, using money from a trust fund I had created with my own assets. The audacity was breathtaking. I quietly retreated to my room, my hands shaking as I closed the door. For the first time in months, I called my old friend Margaret, who lived in a retirement community in St. Paul. Eleanor. What a surprise to hear. From you, she said warmly. How are those grandkids treating you? I broke down and told her everything. The financial manipulation, the lack of legal protection, the conversation I'd just overheard. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally, making small sounds of dismay. Honey, you need to get out of there, she said finally. What they're doing to you isn't right. You've given them the best years of your retirement, and they're treating you like hired help they can discard when convenient. But where would... I go, Margaret, I don't have a house anymore. My savings are tied up in that trust fund. I'm 68 years old with no real income except what Michael allows me to have. You need to talk to that lawyer again. And Eleanor, you need to stop thinking of yourself as helpless. You raised a son, ran a household, managed a marriage. You're not some fragile old lady. You're a woman who's been taken advantage of. That weekend, Michael announced he was taking Patricia to a spa resort for their anniversary. A $3,000 weekend getaway that I was sure came out of the trust fund, though he didn't mention that detail. They would be leaving Friday and returning Sunday. Mom, we'll need you to watch the kids, obviously, he said casually, not asking but assuming. Tyler has a baseball game Saturday, Sophie has an art class, and Emma has a birthday party to attend. Can you handle all that? I looked at him carefully. What if I said no? He laughed, but there was an edge to it. What do you mean, no? Where else would you be going? I might want to visit Margaret for the weekend. I haven't seen my friends in years. Michael's expression shifted. Mom, we've already made reservations. We can't cancel now. Besides, what would we do with the kids? What did you do with them before I moved in? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Michael's jaw tightened. That was different. You live here now. This is part of the arrangement. What arrangement exactly? Because I don't remember agreeing to be on-call childcare for life. Patricia appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension in our voices. Is everything okay? Mom's being difficult about watching the kids this weekend, Michael said. Difficult? I repeated. I'm asking for one weekend off after 10 years of constant availability. Eleanor, you can't be serious, Patricia said, using that condescending tone she reserved for the children when they were being unreasonable. We've given you a home, included you in our family. The least you can do is help out when we need it. Given me a home? I was paying for half their expenses while living in a converted office. Included me in their family? I was the unpaid staff, member who made their lifestyle possible. I think we need to have a serious conversation about expectations, I said carefully. Michael crossed his arms. Fine, let's talk. But not tonight. We'll discuss this when we get back from our trip. That was when I knew the confrontation was inevitable. They were going to try to formalize my role as their dependent while somehow making it seem like they were doing me a favor. They were going to present me with new rules and arrangements that would further limit my autonomy while increasing their control over my finances. I spent that weekend alone with the kids, but my mind was elsewhere. I was planning. I called attorney Sarah Walsh and scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday morning. I called Jonathan Brennan and asked him to prepare a complete analysis of what my financial situation would look like if I reclaimed control of my assets. Most importantly, I began documenting everything with my phone. Every conversation, every request for money, every casual assumption that I would drop my life to accommodate theirs. I was building a case, though I wasn't sure yet what kind of case it would be. Sunday evening, as Michael and Patricia returned from their spa weekend, glowing and relaxed, I watched them interact with their children. Tyler showed Michael his baseball trophy from Saturday's game, the game I had attended alone, cheering from the stands like I had for 10 years. Sophie displayed the painting she'd created in art class, the class I had driven her to and waited for, making small talk with other parents who thought I was her mother. Emma ran to Patricia with a drawing she'd made of our family during the birthday party, a drawing that included me but positioned off to the side, smaller than the others, like an afterthought. "How was your weekend, Mom?" Michael asked, barely, looking up from his phone as he scrolled through work emails. "Educational," I replied. He didn't ask what I meant. He wasn't interested in my thoughts or experiences unless they directly affected his convenience. And that, more than anything else, crystallized my resolve. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. But tonight, I sat in my small room and prepared for the conversation that would change everything. Because after 10 years of being invisible, it was time for my family to see exactly who they were dealing with. The woman who had raised Michael, who had sacrificed her retirement to raise his children, who had quietly funded their lifestyle, while being treated like a burden. That woman was about to remind them of her worth, and she had the bank statements to prove it. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp April air that usually filled me with hope. But as I sat across from attorney Sarah Walsh in her downtown Minneapolis office, reviewing the financial documents spread across her mahogany desk, I felt like I was preparing for war. "Eleanor, what I'm seeing here is financial elder abuse," Sarah said bluntly, removing her reading glasses and looking at me with genuine concern. "Your son has systematically gained control of your assets while creating a situation where you're completely dependent on his goodwill. The fact that you have no legal right to remain in the home you've been financially supporting is particularly troubling." She pulled out a yellow legal pad and began making notes. "Here's what we need to do immediately. First, we're going to revoke the trust fund and demand an accounting of every penny that's been withdrawn. Second, we're going to calculate exactly what you're owed for a decade of unpaid caregiving services. Third, we're going to explore your options for reclaiming your financial independence." "What kind of options?" I asked. "Well, you could demand repayment of the improperly used trust funds and use that money to purchase your own residence. Or, if your son refuses to cooperate, we could file a lawsuit for financial exploitation and unjust enrichment." The word lawsuit made my stomach clench. Against my own son? "Eleanor, your son has benefited financially from your generosity to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars while treating you as disposable help. At some point, family loyalty becomes self-destruction." I spent the rest of Monday in meetings, with Sarah, with Jonathan Brennan, and with a real estate agent who showed me what $200,000 could buy in today's market. It wasn't much, but it was independence. A small condo in St. Paul, near Margaret's retirement community. A place of my own where no one could call me a burden or charge me rent to live in a house I'd been supporting. That evening, I returned to Michael's house with a folder full of documents and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The children were in their rooms doing homework, Patricia was at her book club, and Michael was in his home office, door closed, on what sounded like an important conference call. I knocked gently and waited for his, "Come in." "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," I said, using the formal tone I hadn't employed since he was a teenager in trouble. He glanced up from his laptop, slightly annoyed at the interruption. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of preparing for a presentation tomorrow." "No, it can't wait. We need to discuss the trust fund. His fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. What about it? I sat down in the chair across from his desk and opened my folder. I've been reviewing the withdrawals with my financial advisor and an attorney. There are some discrepancies I need you to explain. Michael's expression shifted from annoyance to something approaching panic. Mom, I can explain all of that. Some of the expenses were necessary for the kids' welfare, which technically falls under the kitchen renovation? I interrupted, reading from my notes. Your new car? The family trip to Europe? Please explain how those benefit my grandchildren's education and future needs. He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from his childhood, when he'd been caught in a lie. Look, the trust fund has been earning interest. There was extra money available, and I thought, you thought you could help yourself to my retirement savings without asking. It's not like that, Mom. You live here rent-free. You don't pay for groceries or utilities. I figured you were benefiting from the arrangement too. I pulled out another document. According to my calculations, I've contributed over $400,000 to this household in the past 10 years. That's not including the value of my unpaid childcare services, which a professional nanny would have charged approximately $250,000 for. Michael stared at the papers I'd laid out on his desk. You're keeping track of money you spent on your own family? Money I spent supporting your family while you treated me like hired help, I corrected. Money that was supposed to secure my own future, not subsidize your lifestyle. He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, I saw a flash of the arrogance that had been growing over the years. Mom, let's be realistic here. You're almost 70 years old. What kind of future are you planning for? You sold your house, you have no job, no real income except what the trust provides. This arrangement works for everyone. Works for everyone? I live in a converted office and get treated like a burden who should be grateful for the privilege. You're not a burden, he said, but his tone was dismissive rather than reassuring. Your family. But you also need to understand that things have changed. The kids are older now. Patricia's in a better place mentally. We don't need as much help as we used to. So what are you saying? He stood up and walked to the window, not meeting my eyes. I'm saying maybe it's time to start thinking about your next chapter. There are some really nice senior communities around here, places where you could have your own space, make friends your own age, participate in activities designed for people in your stage of life. My stage of life? You mean old and useless? That's not what I meant, and you know it. He turned back to face me, and there was something cold in his expression I'd never seen before. Look, Mom, I appreciate everything you've done for us, but you can't live here forever, depending on us to take care of you. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Depending on you? Michael, I've been supporting this household financially for 10 years. I've raised your children while you built your career. I've enabled your wife to avoid parental responsibilities while dealing with her mental health issues. Who exactly has been depending on whom? His jaw tightened. That's enough, Mom. You're being ungrateful and manipulative. We gave you a home when you had nowhere else to go. We included you in our family, let you be part of our lives, gave you purpose during what could have been lonely retirement years. Let me? I stood up, my voice rising. Let me? I funded this life, Michael. I made it possible for you to travel for work without worrying about childcare. I made it possible for Patricia to take her time recovering without the pressure of managing 3 children alone. I made it possible for you to live in this house, drive that car, take those vacations. And we're grateful, he said, but his tone suggested anything but gratitude. But gratitude doesn't mean we owe you lifetime support. You made choices, Mom. You chose to sell your house. You chose to put your money in the trust fund. You chose to move in here and help with the kids. Those were your decisions. I stared at my son, this man I had raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. and realized I was looking at a stranger. Somewhere along the way, my generosity had transformed him into someone who could rewrite history to make himself the victim. You're right, Michael. I did make choices, and I'm about to make another one. I began gathering my documents from his desk. I'm revoking the trust fund. I want every penny returned that was used for non-educational expenses. I want a full accounting of all withdrawals, with documentation. You can't do that, he said quickly. The money's been spent. And besides, the trust was set up for the kids' benefit. You can't just take away their college funds. Watch me. I headed toward the door. I'll be moving out within the month. I've already found a place. Mom, wait. His voice stopped me at the doorway. When I turned back, he was staring at me with a mixture of desperation and anger. You can't be serious. Where are you going to go? What are you going to live on? That's not your concern anymore. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Patricia and I have been talking, and we think it might be good to formalize our arrangement. You could pay a small rent contribution, maybe $1,000 a month, and we'd cover all your other expenses. You'd have security, family around you, purpose with the kids. You want me to pay rent to live in a house I've been financially supporting while continuing to provide free childcare? It's not free if we're covering your living expenses, he said defensively. That's when the last piece of my heart that still belonged to my son finally broke. Michael, let me ask you something. Do you love me? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Of course I love you. You're my mother. Then why are you treating me like a burden you're trying to get rid of while simultaneously trying to keep me around to exploit? His face flushed red. Exploit? Mom, you're being dramatic. We're trying to find a solution that works for everyone. No, you're trying to find a way to keep accessing my money and my free labor while making me pay for the privilege. And when I don't comply, suddenly I'm ungrateful and manipulative. Maybe you are being ungrateful, he said, his voice rising, to match mine. Maybe you don't understand how good you've had it here. Most women your age are alone in nursing homes or struggling to pay bills on Social Security. We've given you a family, a purpose, a comfortable life. You've given me? I laughed bitterly. Michael, I've given you everything. My retirement savings, my independence, my golden years. I've raised your children while you lived your life. And now you want me to pay rent for the privilege of continuing to serve your family. That's not, he started, but I cut him off. Yes, it is, and I'm done. I walked back to his desk and picked up the last of my documents. You have 48 hours to provide me with a complete accounting of the trust fund expenditures. After that, I'm filing a lawsuit for financial elder abuse. You wouldn't, he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Try me. As I reached the door, I heard him say something that stopped me cold. Fine, go ahead and leave. Honestly, Mom, you've become more of a burden than a help anyway. The kids can take care of themselves now, and Patricia and I are tired of walking on eggshells around your drama. Maybe it's time you learned what it's really like to be on your own. I turned around slowly. What did you just call me? I called you a burden, he said, meeting my eyes with a defiance that took my breath away. Because that's what you've become. A burden we've been carrying out of obligation, not love. Those words hung in the air between us like a physical wall. My son, the baby I had rocked to sleep, the toddler I had taught to walk, the child I had supported through every milestone and challenge, had just called me a burden. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For finally being honest about how you really see me. I walked out of his office and straight to my room, where I sat on my narrow bed and cried harder than I had since Robert died. But these weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage and relief, and finally, clarity. Tomorrow I would show my son exactly what this burden was worth, and the truth was going to cost him everything. I barely slept that night, The word burden echoed in my mind like a broken record. But by morning, it had transformed from a source of pain into fuel for my determination. I had spent 10 years being polite, accommodating, and grateful. That version of Eleanor Henderson died the moment my son called me a burden. The new Eleanor was about to be born. At 7 a.m. sharp, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, a stack of financial documents, and a manila folder that would change everything. The children were upstairs getting ready for school. Patricia was in the shower, and Michael was in his usual morning routine of checking emails over coffee. I waited until he sat down across from me with his steaming mug, still in his pajamas and completely unprepared for what was coming. "Good morning, Michael," I said pleasantly, sliding the manila folder across the table. "I have something for you." He glanced at it dismissively. "Mom, if this is more paperwork about the trust fund, I told you I'd get you the information when I have time." "Oh, you don't need to get me anything," I said with a smile. "I already have everything I need right here." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, a detailed financial analysis prepared by Jonathan Brennan. "This is a comprehensive breakdown of every dollar I've contributed to this household over the past 10 years. Would you like me to read it aloud, or would you prefer to review it yourself?" Michael's coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. "What are you talking about?" "Let's start with the direct contributions," I said, consulting my notes like I was giving a business presentation. "Groceries, $47,000. Utilities, $18,000. Property taxes that I helped cover when you were between bonuses, $12,000. Children's expenses, clothing, school supplies, sports equipment, art classes, birthday parties, $31,000. Medical expenses, not covered by insurance, $8,000. Family vacations that I funded, $23,000. His face was growing paler with each number. "Shall I continue? Car repairs and maintenance when money was tight, $9,000. Home improvements that I paid for while you claimed credit, $15,000. Private school tuition for Emma that I paid directly to the school while you also withdrew money. From the trust fund for the same expense, $34,000. "Mom, stop!" "Oh, but we're just getting started." I pulled out another document. "This is the professional childcare analysis. 10 years of full-time nanny services at market rate would have cost you approximately $380,000. Add weekend and evening care, holiday coverage, and emergency babysitting, and we're looking at $450,000 in childcare services." Michael sat down, his coffee cup with shaking hands. "You can't put a price tag on family helping family." "Can I?" I pulled out my phone and began reading from my notes app. Tuesday, March 12, 2019. Quote, "Mom, we can't afford a sitter for date night. Could you watch the kids?" Friday, August 7th, 2020. Quote, "Mom, Patricia's anxiety is acting up. Could you take the kids for the weekend while we go to that resort?" Monday, January 15th, 2023. Quote, "Mom, I know you had plans with Margaret, but Emma's sick and we can't miss the Thompsons' dinner party." I looked up at him. "Should I continue? Because I have 3 years' worth of recordings where you specifically framed my help as a financial necessity." "You were recording our conversations?" The betrayal in his voice was almost comical. "I was documenting a pattern of exploitation. There's a difference." Patricia appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the tension in our voices. She was still in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel, looking between us with growing concern. "What's going on?" she asked. "Eleanor is having one of her episodes," Michael said dismissively. "Episode?" I laughed. "Is that what we're calling it when someone stands up for themselves?" I turned to Patricia and pulled out another document. "This one's for you, sweetheart. A psychological evaluation report I commissioned regarding the long-term effects of caring for someone else's children while being treated as temporary help." Patricia's eyes widened. "You had me psychologically evaluated?" "Not you. Me. Turns out, What I've been experiencing has a name. It's called caregiver exploitation syndrome. The symptoms include financial manipulation, emotional dependency creation, and systematic isolation from support networks. I smiled sweetly. Sound familiar? The children began filtering into the kitchen for breakfast. Tyler, 17 and perpetually hungry, headed straight for the cereal cabinet. Sophie, 14 and always observant, immediately picked up on the tension. 10-year-old Emma bounced in cheerfully, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding. "Grandma Ellie, can you make pancakes?" Emma asked, climbing onto the chair next to me. "Not today, sweetheart," I said gently. "Grandma Ellie has some important business to discuss with your parents." "What kind of business?" Tyler asked, pausing with a box of cereal in his hands. I looked directly at Michael. "The kind where we talk about how much money Grandma Ellie has contributed to this family and what's going to happen to that money. Now." "Mom, not in front of the kids," Michael said urgently. "Why not? They're old enough to understand math, aren't they?" I pulled out my calculator and showed Emma the screen. "Emma, if Grandma Ellie gave your family $650,000 over 10 years, how much is that per year?" Emma squinted at the numbers. $65,000. "Very good. Now, if your daddy's salary is $85,000 per year, what percentage of your family's income came from Grandma Ellie's money?" "Eleanor, stop this," Patricia said sharply. "About 3/4?" Emma said uncertainly. "Excellent math skills," I beamed at her. "So for 10 years, Grandma Ellie paid for 3/4 of everything your family bought. The food you ate, the clothes you wore, the house you lived in, the vacations you took." Tyler and Sophie were staring at their parents with growing understanding. These were smart kids who had never been told where the money for their comfortable lifestyle actually came from. "But Grandma Ellie," Sophie said slowly, "if you paid for all that stuff, where did you live? This is Mom and Dad's house." "That's a very good question, Sophie. The truth is, Grandma Ellie used to have her own house, but she sold it to help your family. The money from that house, $275,000, went into something called a trust fund. That was supposed to pay for your college educations." "Was supposed to?" Tyler asked, his voice sharp with the intelligence that made him honor role material. I pulled out the trust fund statement, the piece of paper that had been burning a hole in my folder since yesterday. "Well, let's see what actually happened." "To that money." Michael lunged for the document. "Mom, don't—" But I was faster, holding it out of his reach while reading aloud. "Trust fund established March 2018 with initial deposit of $275,000. Current balance, $89,000. The kitchen went dead silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. "Wait," Tyler said, his 17-year-old brain working through the implications faster than his parents had hoped. "If Grandma put in $275,000 and there's only $89,000 left, where did the other almost $200,000 go?" I smiled at him proudly. "Why don't you ask your father? He's been the trustee managing your college funds." All three children turned to look at Michael, who was standing frozen by the coffee maker like a deer in headlights. "Dad?" Sophie said quietly. "Where's our college money?" It's complicated," Michael stammered. "Some of it went to things that benefited you kids. The kitchen renovation made the house worth more, which is good for your future. The private school for Emma was an educational expense. The family vacations created memories. And you spent our college money on a kitchen and a trip to Europe?" Tyler's voice was rising with teenage indignation. "Tyler, it's not that simple." "It sounds pretty simple to me," Sophie interrupted. "Grandma Ellie gave us money for college, and you spent it on other stuff." Emma, who was still processing the conversation at her 10-year-old level, asked the question that cut deepest. "Daddy, why did you spend our school money if Grandma Ellie was already paying for everything else?" The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia sank into a chair, her face pale. Michael opened and closed his mouth several times without producing any sound. Finally, Tyler broke the silence. "Grandma Ellie, are you leaving?" I reached over and took his hand. "Yes, sweetheart, I am." "Because Dad called you a burden?" Sophie asked quietly. My head whipped around to stare at her. "How did you—" "I heard you guys fighting last night," she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Dad said you were more trouble than you were worth, and that you were just a burden he had to carry around." The expression on Patricia's face showed this was news to her too. She turned to stare at her husband with something approaching horror. "Michael," she said slowly, "you called your mother a burden?" "I was frustrated," he said defensively. "She was threatening to take away the kids' college money and their college money that she provided in the first place?" Patricia's voice was deadly quiet. "Their college money that you spent on things for us?" "Patricia, you benefited from those expenditures too. The kitchen renovation, I never asked you to steal from your mother to pay for a kitchen renovation." Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I never asked you to take money meant for our children's education to fund our lifestyle." "You didn't ask, but you didn't complain when—" "Because I didn't know," she shouted. "I thought that money came from your bonuses, your salary increases. I never would have agreed to this if I'd known you were essentially stealing from Eleanor." Emma started crying. Tyler put his arm around Sophie, who was staring at her parents like she was seeing them for the first time. The comfortable family dynamic that had existed for 10 years was crumbling in real time. I stood up and began gathering my documents. "Well, this has been illuminating, but I have appointments to keep today." "Mom, wait," Michael said desperately. "We can work this out. We can set up a payment plan to restore the trust fund. You can do whatever you want, Michael. But you'll be doing it without me." I turned to the children. "Tyler, Sophie, Emma, I want you to know that I love you more than anything in the world. What's happening between me and your parents has nothing to do with how I feel about you." "But—" "You're still leaving?" Emma sobbed. "Yes, baby. But I'll still be your grandmother, and you'll always know where to find me." I headed toward the door, then paused and looked back at Michael. "By the way, you have 24 hours to provide me with full documentation of all trust fund expenditures. After that, my attorney will be requesting them through legal channels." "And if I refuse?" I smiled, not the warm grandmotherly smile they were used to, but something sharper and more dangerous. "Then you'll discover that this burden knows exactly how to fight back." 24 hours came and went. No documentation. No phone call, no apology. Just silence from the son who had called me a burden while living off my generosity for a decade. On Wednesday morning, I sat in attorney Sarah Walsh's office as she reviewed the comprehensive evidence I'd compiled. Bank statements, recorded conversations, financial analyses, and photographs of every document Michael had failed to provide. "Eleanor, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of financial elder abuse I've seen in 20 years of practice," Sarah said, adjusting her glasses as she studied the trust fund statements. "Your son has essentially stolen nearly $200,000 from funds you designated for your grandchildren's education, while simultaneously accepting hundreds of thousands in direct financial support." "What are our options?" I asked. She pulled out a thick legal pad and began making notes. "We have several avenues. First, we can demand immediate restitution of all misappropriated trust funds. Second, we can file a civil lawsuit for financial exploitation and unjust enrichment. Third, we can report this to Adult Protective Services as a case of financial abuse." "What would you recommend?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "All three, simultaneously. Your son is counting on your maternal instincts to protect him from consequences. He's gambling that you won't actually follow through with legal action. I think it's time to show him how wrong he is." That afternoon, we began what Sarah called Operation Truth Bomb. First, a formal demand letter delivered by certified mail, requiring Michael to restore the full $186,000 to the trust fund within 30 days. Second, a complaint filed with Adult Protective Services detailing the systematic financial exploitation. Third, preparation of a civil lawsuit seeking damages of $650,000 plus interest and legal fees. But Sarah had an additional suggestion that was pure genius. Eleanor, your son works for a pharmaceutical company, correct? A company that likely has strict ethical guidelines about employee conduct? Yes, he's regional sales director for Morrison Pharmaceuticals. Why? Because companies in regulated industries tend to take a very dim view of employees who engage in financial crimes, even against family members. It reflects poorly on their character and judgment. She smiled grimly. I think Michael's employer should be made aware of his creative approach to financial management. My heart pounded at the implications. You mean? I mean your son is about to learn that actions have consequences, and those consequences extend far beyond family relationships. By Thursday evening, the legal machinery was in motion. The certified mail had been delivered. I had the receipt. Adult Protective Services had opened an investigation, and most importantly, Sarah had sent a detailed letter to the HR department at Morrison Pharmaceuticals, outlining their employees' ongoing legal troubles related to financial exploitation of his elderly mother. I spent Thursday night in my small room, packing my belongings into boxes. Not because I was leaving immediately. Sarah had advised me to stay put until the legal situation was resolved, but because I wanted to be ready. Every photograph, every keepsake, every reminder of my life before I became their unpaid servant went into carefully labeled containers. Friday morning brought the first crack in Michael's facade of denial. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Michael's name appeared on the screen, but when I answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. Mom, we need to talk. Now. Good morning to you too, Michael. How can I help you? Don't play games with me. I know what you've done. I sat up in bed, suddenly fully awake. What I've done? Could you be more specific? Morrison Pharmaceuticals called me yesterday afternoon. They've placed me on administrative leave pending an investigation into what they're calling potential criminal financial misconduct. My boss told me that someone sent them documentation suggesting I've been involved in elder abuse. How unfortunate. For you. Mom, this isn't a joke. If I lose my job, I can't support my family. The kids will suffer. Patricia will... The kids will suffer? I interrupted. Michael, your children have been suffering for years. They've been living a lie, thinking their comfortable lifestyle came from their father's hard work, when in reality it came from their grandmother's retirement savings? That's not... And Patricia? Patricia has been an unwitting accomplice to financial fraud. Do you think she's going to thank you when she realizes you've been stealing from your own mother to maintain an illusion of success? There was a long pause. When Michael spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, desperate. What do you want from me? I want the truth, Michael. All of it. I want a complete accounting of every penny you've taken from the trust fund. I want immediate repayment of all misappropriated funds, and I want a written acknowledgement of what you've done. I can't pay back $200,000. I don't have that kind of money. Then you should have thought of that before you spent money that wasn't yours. Mom, please. Can't we work something out? I'll set up a payment plan. I'll give you full control of the trust fund going forward. Michael, you called me a burden. You looked your mother in the eye and told me I was more trouble than I was worth. Do you remember that? Silence. Do you remember that, Michael? Yes, he whispered. Good. Now you're going to learn exactly what losing this burden actually costs. I hung up and immediately called Sarah Walsh. The fish is taking the bait, I told her. He's scared about his job and trying to negotiate. Perfect. Don't negotiate with him directly. Any communication needs to go through me now. And Eleanor, I have some news that's going to make your day. What kind of news? Adult Protective Services completed their initial investigation yesterday. They're classifying this as substantiated financial abuse. That means it goes on record, and it means Michael is now legally documented as having financially exploited an elderly family member. My hands started shaking with a mixture of relief and vindication. What does that mean practically? It means if he tries to spin this as a family misunderstanding, there's an official government agency saying otherwise. It also means that if he's ever investigated for similar behavior in the future, this creates a pattern. That weekend was unlike any I'd experienced in the past decade. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't responsible for anyone else's schedule. No soccer games to attend, no art classes to drive to, no birthday parties to prepare for, no meals to cook for ungrateful adults who saw me as free help. Instead, I spent Saturday house hunting with a real estate agent, looking at condominiums in St. Paul near Margaret's retirement community. By Sunday afternoon, I had put an offer on a beautiful 2-bedroom unit with a balcony overlooking a lake. The asking price was $185,000, money I would have from the trust fund restitution if Michael complied with our demands. Sunday evening, Patricia appeared at my bedroom door. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her usual polished appearance replaced by wrinkled clothes and dark circles under her eyes. "Eleanor, can we talk?" I gestured to the only chair in my small room. "Of course." She sat down heavily, then immediately started crying. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know what Michael was doing with the trust fund money." "I believe you, Patricia." "Do you really?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Because I keep thinking about all the times you paid for things, and I just accepted it. Like it was normal for you to cover our expenses while living in this tiny room." I studied her face carefully. Patricia had always been self-absorbed, but there was genuine remorse in her expression now. "Patricia, can I ask you something honestly?" "Yes." "Did you ever wonder where the money was coming from? When Michael bought you expensive jewelry on a middle manager's salary? When we took vacations that should have been beyond our budget? When he traded in his car for a luxury model?" She was quiet for a long moment. I told myself he was just good with money, that his bonuses were bigger than he let on. I didn't want to ask too many questions because I was afraid of what I might find out. And now you know. Now I know my husband has been stealing from his mother to make me think. He was more successful than he actually was. She wiped her nose with a tissue. "Eleanor, what can I do to make this right? You can start by telling me the truth about something. The conversation I overheard a few weeks ago, where you and Michael were discussing charging me rent and talking about senior living communities. Was that your idea or his?" Patricia's face crumpled. "It was mine. I was the one who said you were getting too comfortable treating this like your house, instead of understanding you were a guest. I was the one who suggested charging you rent." "Why?" "Because I was jealous," she whispered. "The kids went to you for everything. When they were hurt, they wanted Grandma Ellie. When they needed help with homework, they asked Grandma Ellie. When they were excited about something, they ran to tell Grandma Ellie first. I was their primary caregiver for 10 years, Patricia. Of course they bonded with me." "I know that, but it made me feel like a failure as a mother, like they loved you more than me. So instead of trying to build better relationships with my own children, I decided the problem was that you had too much influence in our house." I reached over and took her hand. "Patricia, those children love you. You're their mother. Nothing will ever change that. But I wasn't acting like their mother. I was acting like a visitor in my own family, letting you handle all the real parenting, while I focused on myself." She looked around my small room. "And you were living like this while making our lives possible. What are you going to do now?" "I'm leaving Michael," she said quietly. I can't stay married to someone who would steal from his own mother and then call her a burden when she asked questions about it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Patricia, don't make any decisions based on what's happening between Michael and me. This isn't about you, Eleanor. This is about discovering that the man I married is capable of systematic financial fraud against someone he claims to love. If he can do this to his mother, what else is he capable of? She stood up to leave, then turned back. I want you to know something. When Michael said you were a burden, I should have defended you immediately. I should have told him he was wrong and cruel and ungrateful. I didn't, and I'm ashamed of that. Patricia, I'm going to testify for you, Eleanor. Whatever legal action you're taking, I'll tell them exactly what Michael did and what I witnessed. It's the least I can do. After she left, I sat in my small room and realized that sometimes the most unexpected people find their conscience when the truth finally comes to light. Monday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Mrs. Henderson, this is David. Morrison from Morrison Pharmaceuticals. I'm the VP of Human Resources. I believe your attorney has been in contact with our company regarding your son, Michael Henderson? Yes, sir. Ma'am, I'm calling to inform you that we've completed our investigation into Mr. Henderson's conduct. Based on the documentation provided and our own internal review, we've terminated his employment effective immediately. My legs went weak. I see. Mrs. Henderson, I want you to know that Morrison Pharmaceuticals has zero tolerance for employees who engage in financial crimes, particularly against vulnerable family members. Your son's actions reflect a fundamental lack of character that we cannot overlook. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Michael had lost his job. Patricia was leaving him. The children were going to have their world turned upside down. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt completely, powerfully free. The burden had finally been lifted, but not from the person Michael thought it would be. The news of Michael's termination spread through the house like wildfire. By Tuesday afternoon, the children knew their father had lost his job, though the full reasons why remained unclear to them. What they did understand was that their family was falling apart. And somehow, it was all connected to the financial revelations from the kitchen table confrontation. Tyler was the first to seek me out. I found him sitting on the back porch steps that evening, staring out at the yard where I'd taught him to throw a baseball when he was 8 years old. Grandma Ellie, can I ask you something? I sat down beside him, noting how much he'd grown in the past year. At 17, he was taller than his father, with the same dark hair, but thankfully, his grandmother's sense of justice. Of course, sweetheart. Is it true that Dad stole our college money? The question was so direct, so honest, that I knew I owed him the same level of honesty in return. Yes, Tyler. Your father took money from the trust fund that was specifically designated for your education and used it for other purposes. He nodded slowly, processing this information like the intelligent young man he'd become. And you're the one who put the money in the trust fund in the first place? Yes. So basically, Dad stole your money that you were saving for us, and then called you a burden when you asked about it. The clarity of his assessment took my breath away. That's essentially correct. Tyler was quiet for several minutes, picking at the paint on the porch railing. Finally, he looked at me with eyes that seemed much older than his 17 years. Grandma Ellie, I've been thinking about everything that happened the other morning, about how you paid for most of our stuff all these years, and how Dad made it seem like he was this great provider. Tyler, your father loves you. He made mistakes, but no, let me finish. His voice was firm but not disrespectful. I remember things differently now. Like when I wanted to play travel baseball in 8th grade, and Dad said we couldn't afford it. But then mysteriously, a week later, he said he'd worked something out, and I could join the team. That was you, wasn't it? I nodded silently. And when Sophie needed art supplies for her advanced classes, and when Emma wanted to go to that expensive summer camp, Every time Dad said no initially and then changed his mind a few days later, that was always you covering the costs. Your father wanted to give you those things. He just needed help sometimes. Help? Tyler laughed bitterly. Grandma Ellie, you weren't helping. You were paying for our entire lives while Dad took credit for being a good provider. He stood up and started pacing the small porch. Do you know what the worst part is? All these years I thought my dad was successful. I was proud of him for giving us such a good life. I bragged to my friends about our house, our vacations, the stuff we had. Tyler. But none of it was real. It was all built on you sacrificing your own retirement, your own home, your own life. And instead of being grateful, Dad called you a burden and tried to charge you rent. The pain in his voice broke my heart. Sweetheart, I don't want you to think badly of your father. He's still your dad, and he does love you. Maybe he loves us, but he doesn't respect us. If he respected us, he wouldn't have lied about where our comfortable life was coming from. If he respected you, he wouldn't have stolen your money and then tried to make you feel guilty for asking about it. That weekend, something unprecedented happened. Tyler called a family meeting, not his parents, but his siblings. Sophie and Emma gathered in the living room on Saturday afternoon while Michael was out job hunting and Patricia was at therapy. We need to talk about what's happening with Grandma Ellie, Tyler said, taking charge with the natural leadership that would serve him well in college. Sophie, now 14 and possessing an artist's sensitivity to emotional truth, spoke first. I know Dad did something wrong with money, but I don't understand why that means Grandma Ellie has to leave. Because Dad called her a burden, Emma said quietly. At 10, she had absorbed more of the adult conversation than anyone realized. He said she was more trouble than she was worth. But that's not true, Sophie protested. Grandma Ellie does everything for us. She's the one who comes to my art shows, who helps with homework, who makes sure we eat vegetables. Tyler nodded grimly. That's exactly the point. Dad has been taking advantage of Grandma Ellie for years, and instead of being grateful, he decided she was a burden when she asked questions about her own money. So what do we do? Emma asked. We tell Grandma Ellie that we love her and we want her to stay, Sophie said immediately. It's not that simple, Tyler said. Grandma Ellie has been living like a servant in our house. She gave up her own home, her own life, to take care of us. And Mom and Dad have been treating her like hired help instead of family. So we treat her better, Emma suggested with the straightforward logic of a child. Emma, it's not about us treating her better. It's about the fact that she's been paying for our entire lifestyle while living in a tiny room and being called a burden by our father. The three children sat in silence, grappling with the complexity of adult relationships and the consequences of their parents' choices. Finally, Sophie asked the question that had been haunting all of them. Is Grandma Ellie going to stop loving us because of what Dad did? No, Tyler said immediately. Grandma Ellie loves us no matter what, but she needs to take care of herself now, because obviously no one else has been doing it. That evening, the children approached me together, a united front that reminded me why I'd sacrificed so much for them over the years. Grandma Ellie, Tyler said, we want to apologize. For what, sweetheart? For not realizing what was happening, Sophie said. For not understanding that you were giving up everything for us while Dad was being awful to you. Emma climbed onto my lap, something she hadn't done in months as she'd been asserting her growing independence. Grandma Ellie, we don't want you to leave. I know you don't, baby, but sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions. But where will you go? Emma asked, her eyes filling with tears. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. I'm going to get my own place. A little apartment where I can be independent and make my own choices. Can we visit you? Sophie asked. Of course you can visit me, whenever you want. Tyler sat down on the arm of my chair. Grandma Ellie, can I ask you something honestly? Always. Are you angry at us for benefiting from what Dad did to you? The question caught me off guard. Oh, Tyler. No, sweetheart. I'm not angry at you. You didn't know what was happening. You were children living your lives, trusting the adults to handle things properly. But we should have noticed, Sophie said. We should have realized that you were living in that tiny room while we had big bedrooms. We should have wondered why you never seemed to have any money for yourself while you were always buying things for us. You were children, I repeated firmly. It wasn't your responsibility to notice those things. We're not children anymore, Tyler said quietly. And we notice now. Over the next few days, something beautiful and heartbreaking happened. The children began trying to take care of me in small ways. Tyler started doing his own laundry instead of leaving it for me. Sophie cleaned up after herself without being asked. Emma began setting the table and helping with dinner preparation, but the most significant change was in how they talked to me. Gone were the casual assumptions that I would handle everything. Instead, they started asking, Grandma Ellie, would you mind helping me with this? And, Grandma Ellie, do you have time to look at my homework? They were treating me like a person with my own needs and schedule, rather than a live-in service provider. On Thursday, Tyler came to me with a proposal that nearly broke my heart. Grandma Ellie, I've been thinking about college. Oh? What about it? I think I should go to community college for the first 2 years instead of the expensive universities I applied to. I stared at him in shock. Tyler, why would you do that? You have the grades for any school you want. Because there's no college money left, is there? Dad spent it, and now he doesn't have a job to pay for college anyway. So it makes more sense for me to go somewhere affordable. Tyler, the trust fund situation will be resolved. You don't need to. Even if you get the money back, it should go to your retirement, not my college. You've already given up too much for us. The maturity and selflessness in his voice made me want to cry. Sweetheart, that money was always intended for your education. Money you earned and saved, that Dad stole and spent on himself. If you get it back, you should use it to build the life you gave up for us. Later that evening, I overheard a conversation between the 3 children that I'll never forget. I think we should get jobs, Sophie was saying. Tyler's old enough to work at the grocery store and I could babysit or walk dogs. Why? Emma asked. Because Grandma Ellie spent all her money taking care of us, and now she has to start over. Maybe we could help her buy furniture for her new apartment or something. But we're just kids, Emma protested. We're kids who lived a really good life because our grandmother sacrificed everything for us, Tyler said. The least we can do is try to give something back. That night, I called Margaret and told her about the children's reactions. Eleanor, those kids have learned more about integrity and gratitude in 1 week than their father learned in 42 years, she said. You raised them right, even if you weren't their mother. I'm so proud of them, Margaret. But I'm also heartbroken that they feel responsible for their parents' mistakes. They don't feel responsible for the mistakes. They feel responsible for showing love and gratitude to someone who deserves it. There's a big difference. As I hung up the phone, I realized that while I was losing my son, I was discovering that my grandchildren had inherited the best parts of their family's character. They were going to be okay, no matter what happened to their parents' marriage or their father's career, and maybe, just maybe, that was worth everything I'd sacrificed to raise them. 3 weeks after Michael lost his job, Sarah Walsh called with news that would change everything. Eleanor, we've reached a settlement agreement with your son. He's agreed to full restitution of the trust fund, plus interest and legal fees. I sat down heavily in my small room, barely able to process what I was hearing. How much are we talking? About $234,000. The original $186,000 that was misappropriated, plus 6% annual interest calculated from the date of each withdrawal, plus your legal costs. The total comes to $234,000. But Sarah, Michael doesn't have that kind of money, especially now that he's unemployed. That's where it gets interesting, she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Apparently, Patricia has been doing some digging of her own. She discovered that Michael has a secret investment account, money he's been hiding from the family for years. Stock options from his previous job, bonuses he never declared, even some cryptocurrency investments. My mouth fell open. How much money are we talking about? Enough to cover the settlement with about $50,000 left over. Turns out your son has been playing poor while sitting on nearly $300,000 in hidden assets. The betrayal cut even deeper than the original theft. Not only had Michael stolen my money, but he'd been hoarding his own wealth while allowing me to subsidize his family's lifestyle for years. There's more, Sarah continued. Patricia is filing for divorce, and she's demanding full custody of the children. She's also requesting that Michael be required to pay back child support for all the years you essentially funded the children's expenses while he saved his own money. Is that legal? It's creative, but given the circumstances and the documented financial abuse, a judge might be very sympathetic. Patricia's attorney is arguing that Michael defrauded his own family by pretending to be financially struggling, while secretly accumulating wealth. That afternoon, Michael appeared at my bedroom door for what would be our final conversation as mother and son. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. But for the first time in years, I felt nothing when I looked at him. No maternal instinct to comfort him, no desire to fix his problems, no guilt about his suffering. Mom, I'm here to give you this. He held out a cashier's check for $234,000. I took it without comment, glancing at the amount before setting it on my nightstand. Aren't you going to say anything? He asked. What would you like me to say, Michael? I don't know. Thank you? I'm sorry? Something. I studied his face carefully. Are you sorry? Of course I'm sorry. I never meant for things to get this bad. What exactly are you sorry for, Michael? Be specific. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry for using the trust fund money inappropriately. I'm sorry for not being more transparent about the finances. I'm sorry for calling you a burden. Are you sorry for lying to your family about your financial situation while allowing your elderly mother to subsidize your lifestyle? Yes. Are you sorry for hiding nearly $300,000 in assets while pretending you couldn't afford basic expenses? His face flushed red. How did you... Patricia found your secret accounts, Michael. Turns out you've been playing poor while sitting on a fortune. So I'll ask again, what exactly are you sorry for? I'm sorry for all of it, he said quietly. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there were consequences, but you're not sorry for what you did, because if you were truly sorry, you would have stopped doing it years ago. He stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. Michael, I have one question for you, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. In the past 10 years, did you ever, even once, consider how your actions were affecting me? Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Did you ever think about the fact that I gave up my own home to help your family? Did you ever consider that I might want friends, hobbies, a life of my own? Did you ever wonder if I was happy living in a converted office while you enjoyed the master bedroom of a house I was helping to pay for? Mom, did you ever think about what would happen to me when I got older and needed care myself? Did you have a plan for that? Or were you just assuming I'd always be available to serve your family's needs? His lack of response was answer enough. I spent 10 years making your life easier, Michael. I raised your children, supported your household, enabled your wife's recovery, facilitated your career advancement. And in return, you stole from me, lied to me, and called me a burden when I asked questions. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed bitterly. Michael, embezzling nearly $200,000 from your mother isn't a mistake. It's a crime. Lying to your family about your financial situation while forcing your elderly mother to subsidize your lifestyle isn't a mistake. It's systematic fraud. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the yard where I'd spent countless hours playing with his children. But the worst part wasn't the money, Michael. The worst part was how you made me feel invisible. Like, my needs, my feelings, my future didn't matter as long as your family was comfortable. That wasn't my intention. Your intentions don't matter anymore. Your actions do. And your actions showed me exactly how little I meant to you. I turned back to face him. I want you to leave now. Mom, please. I know I can't undo what I've done, but maybe we can find a way to move forward. The kids need their grandmother. The kids will always have their grandmother. But you made your choice when you called me a burden. Now you get to live with the consequences. So that's it? You're cutting me out of your life? Michael, you cut me out of your life years ago. You just kept me around to use. There's a difference. After he left, I sat in my small room and cried one last time. Not for the son I was losing, but for the son I'd thought I'd raised. The boy who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the best mom in the world. The teenager who'd called me when he was homesick at college. The young man who'd been so proud to introduce me to Patricia. That person was gone, replaced by someone who could look his mother in the eye and call her a burden while living off her generosity. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls that would shape my new life. First, I called the real estate agent and put in a full cash offer on the condo in St. Paul. No mortgage, no monthly payments, complete ownership of my own space for the first time in 10 years. Second, I called Margaret and told her I'd be moving to the retirement community within the month. Third, I called Tyler. Grandma Ellie, are you okay? Dad came home last night looking terrible and he's been locked in his room ever since. I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than fine, actually. I'm free. Free? Tyler, I want you to know that your college fund has been restored. All of it, plus interest. You can go to any university you want. Grandma Ellie, I meant what I said about community college. I don't need... You're going to get the education you deserve, Tyler. That money was always meant for you. And your sisters. Your father's mistakes don't change that. What about you? Don't you need that money for your retirement? Sweetheart, I have everything I need. And more importantly, I have something I haven't had in 10 years. What's that? My freedom. 2 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of my new condo, looking at the bright, airy space that was completely mine. 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for when the grandchildren visited. A full kitchen where I could cook what I wanted, when I wanted. A living room with furniture I'd chosen myself. A balcony overlooking the lake where I could sit with my morning coffee and watch the sunrise. Margaret helped me arrange my belongings, chattering excitedly about all the activities available in the retirement community. Eleanor, there's a book club that meets every Tuesday, and a walking group that does the lake trail every morning. Oh, and they have art classes. Sophie would love to see what you create. As I unpacked the last box, photographs of the grandchildren, I realized something profound had happened. For the first time since Robert died, I felt like myself, again. Not someone's caregiver, not someone's financial support system, not someone's burden. Just Eleanor Henderson, a 68-year-old woman with her own home, her own money, and her own choices to make. That evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink, my phone rang. It was Emma. Grandma Ellie, I miss you already. I miss you too, sweetheart. But you know what? This isn't goodbye. It's hello to a new chapter where Grandma Ellie gets to be herself again. Will you be happier now? I think I will be, Emma. I think I finally will be. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own home, for the first time in 10 years. No one needed me to make breakfast, drive them somewhere, or solve their problems. It was the most beautiful morning of my life, and as I sat on my balcony with my coffee, watching the lake and planning my day according to my own desires, I realized that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to stop being indispensable to people who don't appreciate your worth. I wasn't a burden anymore. I was free, and freedom, I discovered, was worth every penny of the fight to reclaim it. 6 months after moving into my lakeside condo, I received a call that I never expected, but perhaps should have seen coming. It was Patricia, her voice, strained and exhausted in a way that was all too familiar. "Eleanor, I hate to ask this, but I need help." I set down my coffee and looked out at the lake, where I'd been watching a family of ducks teach their babies to swim. "What kind of help, Patricia?" "It's Tyler. He's been acting out since the divorce was finalized. Staying out late, his grades are slipping, he's angry all the time. Sophie won't talk to anyone, just stays in her room drawing these dark, depressing pictures. And Emma..." Her voice broke. "Emma keeps asking when Daddy's coming home and why Grandma Ellie doesn't live with us anymore." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tug of maternal instinct that had driven so many of my decisions over the years. "Patricia, where is Michael in all of this?" "He moved to Chicago, got a job with a smaller pharmaceutical company, but the pay is terrible compared to what he was making. He sends child support when he can, but it's not enough. I'm working 2 part-time jobs just to keep up with the mortgage. What about the house? Why haven't you sold it?" "I tried, but we owe more than it's worth. Turns out Michael took out a second mortgage last year that I didn't know about. Another lie I discovered after the divorce." I wasn't surprised. Michael's capacity for financial deception seemed endless. "Eleanor, I know I have no right to ask this after everything that happened, but could you come back? Just temporarily, until I get back on my feet. The kids need stability, and you're the only person who's ever really been there for them." The request hung in the air like a test. After everything I'd been through, after finally reclaiming my independence and building a life of my own, my former daughter-in-law was asking me to give it all up again. "Patricia, I appreciate that you're struggling, but I can't come back to that house. I won't go back to living in that converted office, being the unpaid help while someone else makes decisions about my life." "I understand," she said quickly. "But what if things were different this time? What if you had real say in how the household runs? What if we made it a true partnership instead of you just helping out? What exactly are you proposing? Move back in, but as an equal. Your name on the deed, your money helping to pay down the mortgage, but also your rules about how things work. The kids respect you more than they've ever respected Michael or me anyway." I was quiet for a long time, thinking about Tyler's college applications, Sophie's art dreams, Emma's need for stability. But I was also thinking about my morning coffee on the balcony, my book club meetings, my volunteer work at the animal shelter, the life I'd built for myself. "Patricia, I need to ask you something honestly. Are you inviting me back because you genuinely want me as family, or because you need someone to solve your problems?" "Both," she admitted. "I need help, Eleanor. I can't do this alone. But I also realize now that we treated you terribly before. You weren't just helping us. You were holding our entire family together, and we took that for granted." "And what happens when you get back on your feet? When the kids are older and more independent? Do I become a burden again?" "Eleanor, I swear to you, that will never happen. Not after seeing what Michael's attitude cost him. He lost his job, his family, his children's respect. I won't make that mistake." That evening, I called Margaret and told her about Patricia's offer. "Eleanor, you can't be seriously considering this," she said immediately. "You just got your freedom back. You have your own place, your own life. Why would you give that up to go back to being their caretaker?" "Because those children didn't choose their parents' mistakes, Margaret. Tyler's 17. This is his senior year. If his grades slip because of family chaos, it could affect his college prospects. Sophie is at a crucial age where she needs stability, and Emma is only 10. She shouldn't have to suffer because the adults in her life can't get their act together. Eleanor, you can help those children without moving back into that house. You could have them visit you, take them on weekends, be involved in their lives without sacrificing your independence. She was right, of course. But there was something else driving my consideration of Patricia's offer. Something I hadn't admitted to myself yet. The truth was, I missed them. Not the chaos, not the financial stress, not the thankless work of running someone else's household. But I missed being needed by people I loved. I missed Tyler's late-night conversations about his future, Sophie's excited chatter about her latest art project, Emma's sleepy cuddles while watching cartoons. My condo was beautiful and peaceful, but it was also quiet. Sometimes, too quiet. The next day, I drove to Bloomington to have dinner with the children. Patricia had prepared them for the possibility that I might move back, and their reactions were telling. Emma immediately climbed into my lap. "Grandma Ellie, please come home. Nothing's been the same since you left." Sophie was more reserved. "I want you to come back, but only if it makes you happy. You seemed sad when you lived here." Before. Tyler, with his 17-year-old wisdom, asked the hard question, "Grandma Ellie, if you come back, how do we make sure it's different this time? How do we make sure you're not just our employee again?" "What do you think would make it different?" "Tyler? Well, first, you'd need to have your own space. Not that tiny room you had before, but like the master bedroom or something. Mom can take the smaller room." Patricia nodded immediately. "Of course. You should have the best room in the house. And you'd need to have control over your own money," Sophie added. "No more of this family trust fund stuff where someone else decides how your money gets spent." "And we need to help more," Emma said solemnly. "With cooking and cleaning and stuff, you shouldn't have to do everything." I looked around the kitchen table at these 3 young people who had learned more about fairness and gratitude in 6 months than their father had learned in 42 years. "There would have to be some non-negotiable rules," I said slowly. "Like what?" Patricia asked. "Like I keep my condo. It's my safety net, my guarantee that I always have somewhere to go if this arrangement doesn't work out." "That makes sense. And I want legal documents. If I'm contributing to the mortgage, I want partial ownership of the house. No more being a guest in a home I'm helping to pay for." "Absolutely. And Patricia, you need to understand that this isn't about me rescuing you. This is about me choosing to be part of this family as an equal partner, not as free help. That means I get a voice in major decisions, respect for my opinions, and acknowledgement of my contributions. Eleanor, I promise you, things will be different." I spent the next week thinking about it, weighing my comfortable independence against my love for these children who needed stability during a difficult time. Finally, I made my decision. I would move back, but not as the same Eleanor who had left. I was returning as a woman who knew her worth, who had legal protections, who had learned to set boundaries and demand respect. More importantly, I was returning to a family who had learned what it meant to lose me. 3 months later, I was back, in the Bloomington house, but everything was different. I had the master bedroom with its attached bathroom and walk-in closet. My name was on the deed alongside Patricia's. My condo remained as my private retreat for weekends when I needed solitude. The children kept their promise about helping more. Tyler took over all yard work and car maintenance. Sophie managed her own laundry and helped with meal planning. Emma set and cleared the table without being asked and had learned to pack her own school lunch. Most importantly, Patricia kept her word about treating me as an equal partner rather than hired help. When decisions needed to be made about the house, the children's activities, or major purchases, she consulted me first. But the biggest change was in how the children saw me. They no longer took my presence for granted. Tyler regularly thanked me for specific things, driving him to SAT prep, helping with college essays, cooking his favorite dinner. Sophie shared her art with me not because she expected me to praise everything, but because she genuinely valued my opinion. Emma still cuddled with me, but she also checked to make sure I wasn't too tired or busy first. They had learned to see me as a person, not just as someone whose job it was to take care of them. 6 months after my return, Michael called. He'd heard through mutual acquaintances that I was back living with Patricia and the children. "Mom, I hear you moved back in with Patricia." "Yes, I did. Does this mean, could we maybe talk? Try to work things out?" I looked out the window at Tyler teaching Emma to change a tire, one of many life skills he'd decided to master since taking on more responsibility around the house. "Michael, I'm not living here because I've forgiven what you did. I'm living here because these children needed stability, and I chose to provide it on my terms. But we're still family, aren't we? You made your feelings about family very clear when you called me a burden. Some words can't be taken back, Michael. Some actions can't be undone. So that's it? You'll take care of my kids but not forgive your own son?" "I'm not taking care of your kids, Michael. I'm choosing to be part of a family that values and respects me. Something you never learned to do." After I hung up, Patricia found me in the kitchen. "You know, Eleanor, I used to think you were too harsh on Michael. But watching how he still talks about the kids as something you're doing for him, rather than understanding that you're here because you love them and they love you. I get it now." "Get what?" "He still doesn't understand what he lost. He thinks this is about forgiveness and family obligations. He doesn't realize that respect, once lost, has to be earned back. And some people never figure out how to earn it." That evening, as I sat in my comfortable bedroom reading while the children did homework in the living room, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I was a burden living in a converted office, invisible and taken for granted. Today, I was a valued member of a family who appreciated my presence and contributions. The difference wasn't just in how they treated me, it was in how I saw myself. I had learned that love without respect is just obligation. I had learned that generosity without boundaries becomes exploitation. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be someone's burden, even if it means walking away from people you care about. Michael never learned that lesson. But his children did, and maybe, in the end, that was the most important legacy I could leave them. Not financial support or free childcare, but the knowledge that every person, regardless of age, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Some burdens are worth carrying. Others need to be set down so everyone can learn to stand on their own. The wisdom is knowing the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.